Welcome to the Chaos Sector. We return to the Matrix. Jeff H. does what he does best, and that's deflect from the points made in the prior episode. Heck, even the episode prior to that one. If we ask you, what type of murder investigation disregards blood DNA of males discovered at the crime scene? And your response is, and Taylor claims Bethany had exculpatory evidence, so it's a fact. In a sarcastic manner, you have just deflected from the question posed to you. And that proves you're dishonest. All you had to do was admit, yeah, that's an unlawful investigation. I would agree. And the chaos could have a genuine conversation or debate about other elements of the case. But deflecting from the issue at hand, you've only confirmed what we already detected from you. A DC agent, or for those who don't know what that stands for, damage control agent. You've been addressed. And now we can move on. If you're not willing to address the issues at hand, please don't waste your time posting. We won't block you. That's not our style, but,
We didn't care to deal with all of the documents after the guilty plea, but I guess we should just reiterate everything we've already exposed with those same documents. And let's touch on the other housemate, whose accounts have never been clarified until now. Bethany. Yep, throughout the case, Bethany's accounts seemed elusive in a sense. No affidavit was released of her accounts, which indicated she was not an actual witness of anything significant. But apparently, there was significance. Quote, on November 13 at around 13:47 hours, I interviewed Bethany Funk at the Moscow Police Department in regards to the death of her housemates. Bethany was home sleeping in her room located on the basement floor of the residence. Bethany has an iPhone 11 Pro cell phone. Bethany went to we assume this is Sigma Chi, the Sigma Chi party at around 10:30 with Ethan and Xana. Okay, so this confirms that Bethany was with Ethan and Xana. They hung out in an apartment for a while, and then Bethany went up to the main part of the fraternity to hang out at the party. Madison and Kaylee went to the corner club together, not sure when they left. Bethany did not see Ethan and Xana at the party and left to go to residence at Taylor Avenue. Now let's stop here briefly. So initially, Bethany, Xana, and Ethan were at a party. Then Bethany went up to the main part of the fraternity to hang out at the party. They appeared to part ways here. But did you notice that Bethany mentions where Xana, Ethan, Madison, and Kaylee were, but she didn't mention where Dylan was? Perhaps she didn't know where Dylan was. Let's continue. Bethany walked home around 1-ish, and when she got back to 1122 King Road, Dylan and were at the residence and they all watched a movie together. So Dylan was already home. We know this. She was the first housemate back home. We'll get into where she was allegedly at. But Dylan is back at home with company, which appears to be a male. Now, her boyfriend claimed he wasn't in Moscow that night. Rather, he was in Boise. Well, who is this male Dylan is snuggled up with watching movies? Wait, let's not claim it's a male. It might be a female friend just hanging out. Nevertheless, it's still a bit suspicious. Bethany goes on to claim that Madison and Kaylee returned home around 1:45 to 2 a.m. The house and Dylan went to bed. So in about an hour, leaves once Madison and Kaylee arrive back home. Could be something there, or it could be nothing. Bethany hung out with Madison and Kaylee for a while in Kaylee's room. Okay, so in the exhibit, this was the claim, but now we know that Bethany was also upstairs, while Dylan apparently went to bed. Bethany and Madison took Murphy out to go to the bathroom between 2:30 and 3 a.m. Okay, now it was speculation early on that Kaylee had taken Murphy out for a walk at some point, but it was actually Bethany and Madison. It's not that strange, to be honest. They're all housemates, and Murphy was family with everyone. But it does raise the question of why Kaylee didn't accompany both of them outside. Bethany did not stay outside for very long as it was cold. Madison then went to bed and watched a television show to help her go to sleep. Now stop right here. Who is confirming this? Bethany? So Madison told Bethany she is going to watch a specific television show? Let's say this is possible, but what was left out of this report is that Madison had asked Bethany if she's seen Murphy, and Bethany told her no, meaning Murphy had run off somewhere. Right? But if Madison knew Murphy had run off, wouldn't she tell Kaylee about it? Okay, this justifies the narrative that Kaylee and Madison were texting Jack to see if he found Murphy, which was around 2:30 to 3 a.m., the same time that Bethany claimed her and Madison took him outside. So an approximate time, perhaps 5 minutes later, Murphy runs off. The timing is off, though. I believe it was 2:26 a.m. to 2:52 a.m., which both Kaylee and Madison had been texting Jack, which was allegedly about Murphy missing. Bethany would go back inside within a few seconds, and Madison is still out on the patio area with Murphy, right? Now, at what point would Bethany know that Madison went back upstairs in her bedroom to watch this specific show because Madison would have asked her about Murphy missing? Did she just say the hell with it and tell Bethany she's going upstairs to watch Baby Daddy to help her go to sleep? She's going to notify Kaylee that Murphy had run off, and of course Kaylee decides to go look for him. Did Madison go with her, or did she just let Kaylee deal with it? Remember, Dylan stated that Kaylee told Murphy to go upstairs in her body cam accounts. So what time would this have been? Because we can assume that Madison is in her bedroom allegedly asleep already. It would have to be after the 2:52 a.m. time frame of them texting, so this pushes into the 3 a.m. hour, meaning Kaylee is still outside. Wait, let's make sure our speculation doesn't get misunderstood. Bethany and Madison were outside from 2:30 to 3 a.m. This is considered an approximate time, not specific. In Bethany's view, it could have been 2:30 a.m. or it could have been 3 a.m. But if we align the claim the text messages were about Murphy missing, then it would have to be around 2 a.m., as the first text message was at 2:26 a.m. In the Linda Lane surveillance, a dog is heard barking at 2:02 a.m. and then howling, yes, howling, at 3:06 a.m. Now, the first bark could be a bark of greeting the housemates back at home. This would be around the time they arrived back, which would be around 2 a.m. But the howling at 3:06 a.m. is definitely not a pleasant expression of the dog. As we pointed out, dogs howling indicate more specific issues that the dog has experienced. 1. The dog could be lonely and seeking attention or affection from its owner. In connection to being lonely, the dog could observe its owner leaving the home, which causes sadness. The dog could howl in response to distinct noises, such as noises that could be considered foreign, such as sirens, a car crash, bamming noises, humans having an argument or physical fight. But the one that stands out the most is distress. A dog in distress will howl as it experiences stress due to certain circumstances. I don't know, like Murphy knowing Kaylee was being attacked and then he didn't sense life from her body anymore? This would be at 3:06 a.m. The howling at this time indicated that there was something that triggered this emotion from Murphy. Now, if Bethany had asked Madison if she'd seen Murphy, then Madison had lost him. More than likely, Kaylee then goes outside to find him, although it's kind of hard to believe Murphy wouldn't have been able to return back to the home. It's not like they were miles away, right? Something doesn't add up with this setting. Madison wouldn't lose Murphy like that. Or better yet, when he runs off, where exactly would Madison be or doing to where she didn't know where he was? They're on the porch, where the couch was located, right? So Murphy would run around in that area and then come back inside, especially since he knows Kaylee is home. Perhaps if Kaylee wasn't there, he would be more prone to lure off further, but he definitely wants to get back to his owner. It makes me wonder if this even happened. Now, Dylan did state that Kaylee went upstairs as she told Murphy to go upstairs. It creates a setting where Kaylee had found Murphy and then came back inside, but there wasn't any mention of Kaylee going to find Murphy, either from Dylan's accounts nor Bethany's accounts. In other words, there is a gap of activity that is not revealing where Kaylee was and who she interacted with during the time frame Murphy allegedly was missing.
Wait, before we continue, there's more context to Murphy's wandering off. Apparently, some time prior, Murphy would go off deeper into the woods behind the home, coincidentally where the alleged stalker had been snooping around. Quote, "Did Brian Kohberger win over Kaylee Gonzalez's dog before the Idaho murders, letting him slip into house undetected?" Wow, but notice the subheader. Kaylee Gonzalez's golden doodle Murphy began to act strange before the murders, and at one point was taken from the home, say her friends. So Murphy was taken from the home prior to the murders. Let's see here. Now, who could just walk into the home while those housemates were gone and take Murphy away? I can think of one person or even another who was always there. And that one person, well, Kaylee had broken up with that one person about 3 weeks prior to the murders. Anywho, in the weeks before the Idaho murders, Kaylee Gonzalez's golden doodle Murphy began to suddenly run off into the woods. At the same time, a neighbor saw a person walking through their yard who they were 92% certain was Kohberger. Kohberger befriending the dog could explain how he managed to sneak into the home of his victims without drawing the dog's excitement or anger. Yep, nice try. Quote, "Did Brian Kohberger make an effort to befriend the dog of one of his victims before stabbing her to death?" The friends and roommates of the 4 University of Idaho students murdered by Kohberger told police that Murphy, the dog owned by Kaylee Gonzalez, developed a sudden and surprising new habit in the weeks leading up to the massacre. Surviving roommates Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk both told investigators about at least one incident when Gonzalez felt she was being watched and followed as she took her golden doodle out for a walk near the off-campus home they shared in Moscow. Funk told police that Gonzalez described the incident to her by saying she saw an unknown male up above their house to the south who was staring at her when she took Murphy out to go potty. Unquote. Now it says, in the weeks leading up to the massacre, Kaylee broke up with Jack about 3 weeks prior to the massacre, and he literally stayed right across the street. Oops, let's try to just examine the article. Around the same time, Murphy began to sometimes suddenly run off into that same wooded area above the house. That information comes from 2 friends of the victims who spoke with police in interviews which were just unsealed by the Moscow Police Department. The names of these friends are redacted in the reports. Quote, "Redacted stated Murphy ran up into the bushes behind the house on several occasions and would not return when called." Unquote. One friend told police. Redacted stated they called Murphy numerous times before he would come back. That friend then directed officers to another individual who they claimed could confirm her story and provide more examples. She told police it happened at a Halloween party shortly before the murders while the group was on the back patio once again and Murphy began to run into the wood line behind the house and not come back. The group also heard noises too that time, similar to what it would sound like if someone was moving through the woods on foot, the friend said in his interview. She then cited another example when 2 weeks before the murders, Murphy once again displayed similar behavior of running into the woods and not coming back when called. Okay, now this definitely seems to align with the time frame where Kaylee had broken up with Jack. To be honest, this isn't necessarily odd behavior. It is a dog. A dog will naturally snoop around like that because it tracks scents and such, so that's always a common occurrence. But they're trying to make it appear that the reason Murphy was venturing off is because Kohberger had been leaving a trail of fucking Scooby snacks deeper into the woods. Someone else could have been doing that as well, who is definitely a potential suspect, till this day even.
Scooby snacks, that'll do the trick. 92% positive it was Kohberger who was spotted in the yard. This is nothing more than retroactive claims, meaning he was already arrested for the crime, so he will be the suspect in retrospect in every incident revolving stalking or other suspicious activity. And everyone needs to understand this, and don't be fooled with these so-called witness accounts. It's to strengthen the belief he was the murderer, but We asked the same question about the claims from WSU students who claimed Kohberger was snooping around their homes and even tried to open the door. And a house full of females, and one was troubled about being stalked. And this stalker was watching her in the woods. They never decided to install a security system, especially after someone had broken into their home and taken Murphy away. Xana's father repaired the front door, remember? Seems it wasn't that big of a deal, even though someone was told to leave the property and was trespassing. I guess not. Let's continue because this is linked to Bethany's accounts also. Quote, she told police that both she and Gonzalez were concerned about someone being behind the house when Murphy would behave in this manner. The most concerning incident, the friend told police, was when she and Gonzalez arrived at the home to find the rear side door standing open and Murphy was missing. Murphy was eventually located, but why he developed this habit remains a mystery. Wait, we have to stop once again. It's not necessarily a mystery to why Murphy, quote, developed that habit. What's more of a mystery is who had been in the home and taken Murphy out when Kaylee had returned, because whoever this is entered through the sliding doors, went upstairs specifically to Kaylee's room, grabbed Murphy, but apparently nobody saw this incident though. Oh, okay. But they spotted the stalker on several other occasions. Oh, but none of the neighbors saw him walk into the home, walk out with Murphy. Oh, okay. Quote, however, a neighbor of the girls also noticed something concerning around that time, telling police she spotted a man who looked nervous walking through her backyard and then returning along that same route. The man allegedly ignored her as she informed him he was trespassing on private property. Oh, those concerned neighbors. Somehow they didn't hear any screaming or violence the night of the murders. Oh, okay. She told police that the man who had curly hair with a large nose was Kohberger, adding that she was 92% certain of this fact. If it were Kohberger who had been sneaking around and drawing Murphy's attention, it could explain how he managed to slip undetected into the home without an excited or protective dog loudly barking at the intruder. Instead, the interviews and police reports suggest that Murphy did not start to bark until after Kohberger left the scene. Kohberger spared Murphy's life, and police found the dog with the bodies of Gonzalez and Madison Mogan, unquote. So I guess Kohberger knew Dylan then because he spared her life as well, right? Just pathetic. Curly hair with a large nose, 92%. This can't be confirmed, and how random is 92%? Should have been like 90 or 95%, more common percentages of probabilities. But I guess that number made sense. Since she has this description, we assume this was during the daytime. So, during the day, Kohberger just walked into their home, apparently didn't concern himself with being caught inside if they abruptly came back, or by lounging Hunter who will come by, or Ethan, or any other random college student that would come over. No, he drove from Pullman to Moscow during the daytime, waited and watched, then went inside, upstairs, specifically to Kaylee's room. And for some reason, he felt Murphy needed to be, quote, tamed for his upcoming plans to murder Kaylee. If you thought it was irrational for Kohberger to enter a Wolf house to attempt murder at night, it's even more irrational for him to just walk inside I'm done.
But a familiar face, someone who was co-owner of Murphy, who had been at the home many times, knew the layout, knew where Kaylee's bedroom was, knew where Murphy was, would have no problems going into the home, and surely neighbors wouldn't see anything wrong with it because, hey, it's Jack, he's cool. Do you think they would say it was Jack snooping around and walking into the home and walking Murphy? And it's likely this would happen considering he is the co-owner of Murphy. I could see Jack coming over when Kaylee was gone, regardless if there were other housemates there, and he would come in and take Murphy for a walk. And mind you, some of those next-door neighbors moved out the next day. Moscow PD visited. The one female clearly looked like she knew something. Even the mainstream media had asked them questions about the alleged audio of the crime happening their camera picked up. Of course, they claimed it was fake. The audio was deemed to be fake, as a male had called Bonnie and told her to get over there as the attacks were unfolding. This was so-called debunked. You also have to keep in mind that at some point, two of those neighbors had gone over to the home around the time the 911 call was made. It was a female neighbor who had spoken to dispatch, remember? At some point, they were called over to the home because Hunter and Emily were already there. But let's get back to the main point. At around 400 to 420 hours, Bethany heard what she thought was a firework and saw a spark on the ground from under her door. Bethany then heard Murphy barking. Now stop. Bethany's affidavit was never, I repeat, was never officially released that included this information. In this setting, Bethany is awake, and it doesn't mention when she had awakened, so we can assume she was awake for some time. The issue here is that she definitely heard the screaming if she heard everything else, but what she assumed to be a firework. Perhaps the claim Kaylee was shot with a beanbag gun is likely. It was considered a bit irrational at one point by the chaos, debating one of the posters, and we went back and personally gave that poster the benefit of the doubt. And the reason was that apparently Kaylee's face was brutally disfigured. AR-100 beanbag gun, detectives found this in the black coat on Taylor Avenue. We'll come back to that in a moment, but let's continue. So Bethany then claims Dylan called her and said she had seen someone in the house, and Bethany told her she could come down to her room and sleep with her. Dylan went to Bethany's room and went to bed. They woke up at around 1100 hours and talked to the other friends who came over, and they checked on Xana and Ethan and found them deceased. Bethany originally called 911 and stated that her friend was passed out and would not wake up. Bethany talked about an incident with Kaylee, who stated about a month ago she saw an unknown male up above their house to the south who was staring at her when she took Murphy to go potty. Bethany stated that Kaylee broke up with her longtime boyfriend about 3 months ago because she was planning to move to Texas, unquote. Now, I thought it was 3 weeks prior to the murders. It was in earlier reports. Doesn't matter. It's still within a time frame of all the stalking and a motive exist. Now, Bethany stated Kaylee broke up with Jack because, yes, this word leads into a reason, because Kaylee was moving to Texas. So Kaylee and Jack broke up because she was moving to Texas. Is it fair to come to this conclusion? Of course. So around this time frame, an unknown male was snooping in the back of the yard, watching Kaylee specifically, yes, Kaylee specifically, while she walked Murphy. Don't know about you guys, but it sure seems like an ex who simply won't let Kaylee go. But you know, he's 1,000% innocent according to Kaylee's family. Well, Steve didn't think so. But Bethany claims she saw a spark from under her door. Now, in the interview, she elaborated a bit and said that the noise could have been Ethan walking around and he may have knocked over something and such. But the spark that she saw from under her door, well, this spark or flash is more than likely from her floor. It brings us back to our crime scene analysis.
Taking the virtual tour throughout the home, we provided our analysis and theory as to what had taken place in real time. Now, on the first floor, you have Bethany's bedroom and the alleged vacant bedroom, which was Ashlyn's. In that episode, while exploring that vacant bedroom, we noticed there was a fuse box present in that bedroom. Quote, what if the lights had been turned off? If so, the killers would be equipped with night vision goggles. Perhaps we assumed at that time. Based on Dylan's accounts, it was very dark, meaning lights were off in the home. Now let me explain. Before someone assumed the lights were on, as Molly claimed to see the lights on upon arriving, the lights may have been on at some point, but they may have been turned off for the attacks or ambush. Perhaps this is when Murphy started barking. Mind you, this is located in the, quote, vacant bedroom. Someone would know this circuit box was in this bedroom, unquote. Now this aligns with Bethany's claim of seeing a flash or spark from under her door, because her viewpoint in her bedroom is facing directly to the front door and the vacant bedroom. She would not see a spark from upstairs because that light wouldn't travel that far downstairs, but a spark that was on her floor, directly down the hall near the front door where the security box was, and further down where the vacant bedroom was with the circuit box, yes, she would get that direct flashing light traveling to her bedroom. You understand? So we know that this activity occurred on the first floor, not the second floor. And that only brings about activity from another individual on that floor. Again, there was blood DNA of a male discovered on the bridging stair rail, descending down to the first floor. This is a suspect. And since this male is traveling downstairs, he left through the front door. Later Sunday morning, it was reported that the front door was wide open. Well, in previous incidents related to the alleged stalker, the housemates came back from a coffee run and discovered the front door wide open. So this is someone who would access through the front door, which has that's right, a code. And we all know there were many in that circle who had the code. And furthermore, we know that code spread to others who may have not been in that circle. Of course. Let's say you have an apartment complex with a security code to get in. Someone uses drugs in that complex. This user gives a security code to the dealer, so they can drop off the drugs to them discreetly, of course. But now the dealer has the code. The user also gives other users the code, and now you have many individuals in and out of the complex who don't reside there. In other words, a highly visible and known party house has individuals directly and indirectly obtaining that security code. The point here is that there was a male suspect who had either injured himself or was attacked by one of the victims running downstairs. Heck, could he have been bitten by Murphy? That's also possible. Bethany didn't mention hearing anyone running downstairs in her interview, but we know the male ran downstairs because he left blood on the bridging stairs. Bethany was silenced early on because this is the exculpatory evidence, my friends. If there was a male running downstairs, then this would prove there were multiple suspects. I mean, we know it anyway, but this proves without a doubt there were multiple suspects. And since this male was never publicly identified, we know his identity is linked to a trail away from Kohberger. That's right. The blood DNA of this male, then identified, is someone who is linked to those housemates. And the further you go down that trail, you end up in that circle of peers being involved. That's why those males were never identified, because it puts the college circle in the hot seat. And that seat is scorching hot, my friends. We know what type of injury that male suffered. Was it from being cut, bitten, scratched, scraped? Madison's fingernails consist of DNA of unknown individuals. It was never publicly identified. For those who are requesting Moscow PD release information, start with the identities of those 3 additional males and the DNA discovered underneath Madison's fingernails. Bet $1 that they will fight tooth and fingernail to avoid releasing that information. Now let's address the beanbag gun theory for a moment.
Now, there were several officers who provided incident reports, so we just picked one out of the list. This is from Officer Corbin Smith. Quote, "In a third-floor bedroom, I observed 2 females laying in bed which appeared to have been stabbed to death. The female laying on the left half of the bed, as I looked at it from the doorway, was unrecognizable. Her face was completely disfigured and was stabbed several times. I was unable to comprehend exactly what I was looking at while trying to discern the nature of the injuries. The second female on the right half of the bed had multiple stab wounds. The comforter was soaked in blood and a pool of blood was still present." Unquote. Now, the description of Kaylee's facial wounds are considered cuts or slashes on her face. Someone wanted to disfigure her face rather than going in and just stabbing her to death, meaning this type of attack, along with the alleged slashes on Ethan's legs, are symbolic and strategic. The lone killer, alleged to be Kohberger, wouldn't have the time to invest this much time and focus on this type of attack. The only way a lone killer would have this much time to meticulously attack their victims in this manner is if there was only one victim, all alone at home, who lived alone. Let's say Kaylee was the target, and she lived alone in an apartment. She had a stalker who had been monitoring her for months or even a year. The stalker plans to murder Kaylee and has her daily life tracked down to when her lights turn off in her home. He breaks in late at night, around 4 a.m., then finds her sleeping. He covers her nose with an alcohol rag and she passes out. He then ties her up, puts a gag over her mouth so she can't scream, and, well, we won't go further into that scenario. But this is the patience and time allotted for someone to cut Kaylee's face up to the point it was disfigured. This was a concentrated attack upon Kaylee, and even though many would think Kohberger was the stalker who would have done this, he wouldn't have the time to concentrate on Kaylee's face, because physically, Kaylee would be fighting or trying to survive. You understand? These wounds either came after she was already deceased or no longer capable of resisting, or she was placed in a position where she was essentially held hostage, which allowed this type of injury to take place. Again, the injuries were so brutal that her face was unrecognizable. And I would even suggest that Dylan and Bethany saw this and didn't dare go near the 3rd floor afterwards due to that visual. But Corbin goes on to describe his findings. Quote, "I was assigned to hold security at the rear slider door. This was the alleged point of entry of the suspect. I observed very large footprints in the snow. I used a tape measure and the foot size measured approximately 13.5 to 14 inches. The footsteps went to and from the rear slider door. I observed the trail of footsteps head away from the slider, then turn right, around a stump in the backyard and lead toward the front of the house. I observed a set of small handprints on the window to the east of the slider. The screen to this window appeared damaged and was laying on the ground. I located smudged fingerprints on the glass slider door. There was a discarded black backpack in the backyard. I photographed these items and attached them to the case, unquote. Now the shoe size, we didn't find out what shoe size Kohberger wore, so we'll leave that to the side for now. The trail of those footprints, though, are going to the backyard, right? Well, this would mean the alleged Kohberger exited through the sliding doors, then turns left, heading to the back of the home. Well, how could Bethany see a naked man running out of the home, which would suggest Kohberger took off the Myers jumpsuit? He would be traveling opposite of where Bethany's bedroom is located, and not only that, she would have to be outside in the front yard to see him. So that claim does not correlate with Kohberger's alleged exit. Either this is a lie that was used to support the Myers jumpsuit narrative, or Bethany saw someone else run past her, like the male who ran downstairs onto her floor and then out the front door. But Corbin noticed fingerprints on a window, but these fingerprints were never identified. Who would this be? Zana? Kaylee? I think the reason this female, which it's likely to be, this female was never identified because it's Kaylee. And this is on the second floor. Again, we keep coming back to this. If Kaylee was on the second floor running away from the danger, then how did she get back upstairs? There were multiple killers. This is the only way she could end up back upstairs. Now, there was speculation early on that Kaylee was shot in the face with a beanbag gun. Initially, we thought that was a wacky theory, but when we re-examined our episode about detectives on Taylor Avenue, well, it suddenly became a logical theory. The object the detective pulled out of that coat appeared to be some sort of weapon. We contemplated, thought about it, and assumed it was a black hatchet in its sheath. But looking at various styles of beanbag guns, we have to admit that is highly possible as well. The only thing we'd have to go back and check is the audio from the security camera next door and the Linda Lane audio to search for that sound effect. It wouldn't be as loud and strong of a force as a firearm shot, but you would hear it. The black backpack found behind the home. Whoever left the backpack in the backyard left it there, not caring about leaving it behind. Yes, Kohberger wouldn't leave that behind. He would take all of his items, including in his, quote, kill kit, with him. But someone who was hired to do the job and get the hell out of there wouldn't care about the backpack because there wouldn't be a direct trail to them personally anyway. It's a throwaway item in their eyes. You see, all of this was never reported early on. This is information that was sealed for some reason, and we see why. It was sealed because it would conflict with the lone killer narrative. There's just too much evidence and information that proves this was a multi-perp crime. Bethany's accounts do not claim to hear any screaming, but she heard Murphy barking approximately around 4 a.m. Well, this is the same time frame that Dylan heard screaming and Murphy barking. So Bethany avoided the screams because it puts her in the same position as Dylan of knowing her housemates were in danger. And then this also eliminates the so-called belief that there was a prank played on them. Here's the problem with Bethany. She has exculpatory evidence but decided to go with the prosecution. Bethany was aware of the attacks and murders just like Dylan was. There's a suspect who came down to Bethany's floor. It's a fact. It's evidence. It's fucking blood DNA of a male running down those stairs. This is what she knows. Now, in all of those documents of interviews and reports from multiple officers, there's more information revealed. Yet in all of it, which would take so much time to review, there is no mention of tracking the 3 additional males whose DNA was discovered at the crime scene. And that's the biggest problem. No matter what Bethany claims in her interview, no matter what Dylan claims, what Hunter claims, Emily, neighbors, and whoever was interviewed, the fact that there were individuals in that home, and one of them left blood on the stair rail running downstairs to the first floor, yet weren't identified and a part of the investigation, this only magnifies there was a cover-up. And there wouldn't be a cover-up if Kohberger was the killer. Simple. We'll get back to the surveillance of his alleged path. This is the...
Hold on, let's address something regarding the beanbag gun theory from Officer John Rosinski's interview. Now, there's a lot from this specific interview, and it draws our attention to other facets. We're compelled to address it. The interview by Rosinski appears to be with Katie, Kaylee's friend who was interviewed by 2020. It's the end of the episode, so I'll just speed things up a bit.
Quote, on November 16, 2022, I spoke with Katie, we assume, at a substation on the University of Idaho campus. I asked if Katie had any special relationships with any of the victims, and Katie said she was really good friends with Xana and met Xana in her freshman year. Katie said she was also close friends with Kaylee and met her freshman year during recruitment. Katie said that she knew Katie the best. Okay, so this appears to be Katie. Quote, I asked Katie if Kaylee hung out or associated with anyone with violent tendencies. Katie said no and expressed she was confused about the incident because what she saw in the news. Now brace yourselves for what Katie admits in this interview. I asked Katie if Kaylee was involved in using illegal substances, and what did Katie say? Katie said, quote, just coke probably, unquote. I asked Katie if she saw Kaylee doing cocaine, and Katie said no, but she knew Xana was pretty into it. It's all leaking out, right? Detective Dean asked if Ethan was into cocaine, and Katie said she did not know. Katie said she didn't know Ethan that well. Detective Dean asked if drugs were being sold from the house or if drugs were more used for parties. Katie said they were used but not sold. Detective Dean asked if there were large quantities of drugs at the house or if the house was known as a drug house, and Katie said no. Unquote. Now we have to stop right here. This needs a full breakdown. I was going to get to the point referencing a weapon spotted that night, but we're ending it right now. This is the evidence of a drug-related motive. We're done, but we're definitely not finished. And this is why it was sealed, my friends. The motive is in all of these interviews. Katie claims Kaylee did cocaine, knew Xana did it, and knew that drugs were being used at those parties. On a side note, I believe she pled the fifth on the issue regarding if drugs were being sold out of the house because that provides a trail. And guess where that trail leads back to? The pushers of drugs in Moscow. That's right, Bonnie and Clyde. Yep, bingo. This is a KO Sector.